Welcome to Dave's Take. Today we are talking about Wolfman. Grr. So Wolfman is about a werewolf, and it's directed by the same person who did The Invisible Man, which back in 2020, I think when that movie was coming out, a lot of people were like, what the fuck is this? And then they saw it and they're like, wow, that was actually pretty great. So I kind of had those types of expectations going to Wolfman. Like, I saw the trailers and I'm like, okay, I mean, whatever. I don't really care. It's a January movie. My only hope is the filmmakers. It could be pretty good. So I'll say for the most part, Wolfman is a solid, surprising movie, especially for a January movie. I know The Invisible Man came out in February, this came out in January. You understand what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I don't think it hits the same heights as The Invisible Man, but there are so many things here that I think are really well executed that kind of surprised me. I first got to say, and this isn't a bad thing, I thought this was one of the more surprising and more interesting parts about this movie, is that it is a horror movie, but I would say it leans more towards drama and thriller. Like, this movie's pretty fucking sad. This is a body horror movie where we see a character that we care about transforming into something that's just monstrous. So you definitely tell this movie has inspiration from, like, The Fly. But if you're going into this movie expecting, like, monster werewolf horror movie, there are parts of that in here, but I think this movie more focuses on the character drama here, which was very refreshing. It made the movie way more interesting. I thought these characters were well done. Christopher Abbott is great here. He has this past to him that feels like he has scars, and he's always trying to avoid that past. And that's one of the many themes of this movie, and I thought it was really well executed. This theme of trying to escape your past, not trying to be something that maybe your father was, and maybe trying so hard to avoid being that thing you eventually turn into it. I thought those themes that were explored in this movie made it pretty interesting. Julia Garner's great too. I liked her character and her relationship with her husband and the daughter. It seemed like there are things that are happening, and to its detriment, there are things that might not be fleshed out enough. But at the same time, I think it's subtle enough to where the audience understands these relationships. They don't over-explain the relationship between the characters. That would maybe drag out the film a little bit. But I will say, I think there's a couple things I wish were fleshed out a little bit by the end. But I gotta say, for this January werewolf horror movie, there are characters and themes here that I thought were investing and pretty interesting. And I think the filmmaking here is great. There's one shot where there is this moving truck that's flipped over and they kind of swoop around the whole thing. The set looks great. The shot looks great. It doesn't feel like a cheap horror movie. It feels like there's real production here. And there are a lot of sequences that are really well done here. There's real suspense. It's very quiet. You really don't know where it's going. And I like how there are certain shots that kind of fake you out. Like, you think the monster's going to be at this part of the screen, but then it fakes you out and the monster's not actually there. It's somewhere else. I will say, though, there are times where it's a little obvious. Like, you know it's about to fake you out. It's like the movie overthought it. But I gotta say, if you made this movie with a different director that has more of a generic style to something like this, they definitely would have just used those first shots. So I gotta give the filmmakers credit. There's also something here I really liked where we would see the perspective of the Wolfman. Anytime we got a sequence like that, I thought that was really interesting. And I really like the effects here. I read they didn't really use much CGI for the Wolfman specifically, and there's a lot of great practical effects with the body horror and how it looks. I thought all that's really well done. And I think the overall story is well executed. We get where our characters are coming from. They go to a place, things start happening. So the movie doesn't really waste your time, and I appreciate that. But there are some issues. I think it definitely drags a little bit. And I think there are points in the movie where it seems like characters are trying to explain something that's happened, or one of those themes I was talking about, or maybe how a character is feeling to the audience. Like, it doesn't give the audience enough credit to understand that our characters are feeling a certain way, or we're supposed to understand the themes that the movie is showing. Which is really frustrating, because if they're more subtle, I think those scenes would have been better. Feels like if they just tighten a few things up with this movie, it could have been, like, really great. But yeah, overall, I think this movie's pretty solid. It's really well made. I like the performances, I like the characters. I like the story. It's not what I really expected. It feels more of a thriller drama than a horror movie, but it still has those horror movie elements. So if you go into Wolfman expecting that, I think you'll have a great time. If you're expecting like a generic werewolf movie, you might be disappointed. But this movie feels a little more elevated than that, and I appreciate it. I'm going to give Wolfman 7 Davey Daves. Are they still doing this like Monster Universe thing? Like, wasn't the Invisible Man supposed to be in some sort of cinematic universe? So is Invisible Man with Wolfman? And if there was a post-credit scene and it showed that, I completely apologize for missing that. I left pretty much when the credits started rolling. But I just gotta say, I'm just wondering, are they still doing that? So, Wolfman, let me know what you guys thought of it once you've seen it. I'm curious to hear. And thank you so much for watching. Click here to see more of Dave's Takes.